Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I, as always, am joined by Virat Nehru from Australia, Ronald Meyer, the US. And today we're getting high on some international feature contenders.
That's correct. It's
We have,
almost midnight where I'm sitting, so I am definitely high on international features and also high on coffee. So I am buzzing right now. So yeah, there you go. I think
I'm
one,
also high on coffee because it's 8 a.m. where I am. So
it's okay.
we're
It's
on opposite ends of the spectrum, but it's like horseshoe theory. You go far enough and the fringes resemble each other.
I thought you were going to say you go far left and you end up being totalitarian either which way, whichever way you go. But that's
Well, that's the point. Only I'm replacing political ideologies with, I don't know, state of caffeination.
that's correct. I mean, I am glad that no matter where we are, coffee and movies bind us. And I mean, the coffee has been pretty shit. I'll be honest, it's doing bare minimum work, but the movies have been doing some pretty good work. I think this is my favorite category of all the categories. It's always been my favorite category. I always love to see what the international features have been, which is why I think for this episode, we're not only going to look at some possible nominations, we have got the international features shortlist, which the Academy Awards have announced, and we'll try to go through as many of them as we can, whichever ones we've seen. But almost all of the films are exciting. I think this is the category which really I look forward to every year. It's the one category that I think all cinephiles, people who love cinema, not that people who don't, love cinema who like other categories, but it's the kind of one that critics get most excited about. That's why I feel. Or maybe is that a myth as well, Ron? Am I wrong again? Are we creating yet another myth by saying critics love international feature category and nobody else does? Is this wrong again? Are we wrong again?
No, I don't think you're totally wrong there. And I just want to add that this year there's particular reason to be excited because unlike, the past several years, I don't believe we're going to see all of the international feature love funneled toward one film. It really seems like this year the love is going to be spread out. We have Perfect Days and Anatomy of a Fall and The Taste of Things and Fallen Leaves. And we've just seen with the Golden Globes with Alma Poisti's surprise nomination in Comedy Musical Actress.
No, Ron, I think you're absolutely right. I think there is a bit of a spillover effect. I think from previous years, we used to hone in on one film that really kind of crossed over and sort of, made the big leap from international feature category. Think of your
Like Drive
Parasite
My Car
or Drive My Car
or
and
Parasite.
Parasite. And, so you basically said, okay, here's putting all our kind of eggs in one basket per se, and none of the other films kind of really had a chance. But I think this year maybe it's the state of distribution with kind of Mubi picking up some of these films and distribution becoming a lot easier, and a lot of people actually getting to see a lot of these films a lot earlier as well. I think other films in these categories, a lot of people have already got to see, which is kind of beautiful through the film festival circuit. So it kind of makes it more accessible to see that a lot of these films have the spillover effect. And I think it's generally good for cinema as well. We don't need to kind of hone in on the one film that can sort of represent the state of international film, but to see that there is a lot of variety in international talent. You can, for example, for me, one of the best acting performances in the male category is in Perfect Days. And, we've already mentioned Alma from Fallen Leaves crossing over for Golden Globes. There's a very good acting performance in The Teacher's Lounge as well, which I think we've just seen not too long ago.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see the spread. And I don't know, it just makes me happy for the state of cinema, which I'm glad to, the second last day of the year, to be happy about something and to be in a joyful mood before we can say goodbye to
Right.
2023, which is
We're
also nice.
we are recording, if anyone is interested, on December 29th, US. time, and Virat is one day closer to 2024.
I'm
30th.
4 minutes into December 30th. So for me, life is shorter on this end. I'm running out of time. 2024. You better do some good things for me, Better be some perfect days and not enough fallen leaves for me.
That's to make a reference to an earlier episode. That's our pun of the day out of the way, Virat.
That's good. Fantastic. But let's run through the films that are in the shortlist first. So we begin with Armenia, which has Emirikatsi. I think that's how we pronounce it. So apologies for any incorrect pronunciations. Then we have The Monk and the Gun from Bhutan. Then we have Promised Land from Denmark. That's an ominous title. I don't think 2023 is the year where we should be talking about any kind of promised lands. But anyway, that's a different conversation altogether. And right from Denmark, we move to Fallen Leaves from Finland. Then we have The Taste of Things from France.
One of your favorites of the year.
Yep, that's correct.
Fallen Leaves, not The Taste of Things.
I mean, if it is The Taste of Things to Come, then that's correct. Then that would be nice. If Fallen Leaves and the success of Fallen Leaves and my love for Fallen Leaves translates, maybe that is The Taste of Things to Come. Who knows? But no, The Taste of Things to Come is a film from France. And then we have The Teacher's Lounge from Germany.
Wait. We should quickly throw in, it's a movie from France that controversially took the slot from the critical darling of the year, Anatomy of a Fall.
I know.
Well, the critical darling and palm winning.
Yes, and we say critical darling and palm winning because I definitively hate it. It's not featuring in my best of list of the year. It's nowhere near it. None of that sort of anatomies are falling anywhere near my best of lists. So
you have to turn in your film critic credentials if you don't like Anatomy of a Fall, apparently, because every top 10 list of the year just is representing that movie. And like you, I don't understand why.
Thank God. I am so happy. I mean, I know we're not supposed to care about these things, but I was genuinely becoming paranoid because the amount of people who just thought that I have somehow missed, putting that film in my list, and then they were just frantically messaging me. It's like, Virat, have you missed Anatomy of a Fall? I think you missed a title in there. And they were so convinced that I hadn't omitted it, that I've actually missed it. That they were just trying to be nice and polite to remind me that, hey, maybe instead of American fiction, what you really meant was Anatomy of a Fall. And we're just being nice to you because, we don't want you to get in any kind of trouble. Because we want you to be critically heralded and accepted as part of this community. So thank you for everyone who tried to tell me that I should be doing the right thing. All your messages have been received and ignored. So that's right.
Okay, so back to the list. I think we were up to Germany, The Teacher's Lounge. I'll let you continue.
Yeah, I mean, and The Teacher's Lounge is simultaneously the most German film I've seen that I can think of in terms of if I could think in a German formalist way, while at the same time it has an emotional undercurrent which I wasn't expecting from the film. I'm still trying to process it, but it's an interesting film nonetheless. Then we have Gotland from Iceland, which I think is a substitute for the Chelan About Dry Grasses snub. That's Gotland for me. It's that kind of vast landscape film where the landscape really takes over the film and the vastness of the landscape has an effect on all the characters in the film. Then I'm sorry, the Italian submission, Io Capitano, unless I'm completely butchering my Italian pronunciation. People listening, do not correct me. I know I'm doing it wrong, but the film. It is. Is it Io or O Capitano?
I would intuitively say Io, but I think that's wrong, and I've heard people pronounce it the way you just did.
Okay. Either it is Io or O Capitano. It is Captain, my captain. the thing it is. It's from Italy. Then we move on to Mexico, which has Totem, which is the one Lucas Don't film not made by Lucas Don't. That is my summation of Totem, and that's as much as I want to say about it, because otherwise I'll get enraged and really angry, because I think it's the most emotionally manipulative film in this whole category. That's as far as I'll go. Well, I've gone far enough. I don't think that's as far as I'll go. That's pretty far enough. So that's okay. And then we move on to one of my favorite films of not just this category, but the year, The Mother of All Lies, which took out the top prize at the Sydney Film Festival. A sneaky little name drop from my little beloved festival from Sydney. But, it's a wonderful, wonderful film. And I wish if this does get a nomination, that more people get to see it come next year and beyond. It's a really wonderful film. And it's also one of the few hybrid documentaries. It won the top prize.
Documentary prize at Cannes, I believe.
I believe so, but it definitely won the top prize at the Marrakesh Film Festival recently. And it was also at Doc NYC as well. So it's done the rounds, and it's one of the few hybrid documentaries in the category. So in that sense, it's also an outlier, because the rest are mostly features. So it's also interesting to see a documentary being represented in that field.
Sorry. So the documentary prize at Cannes was shared with Four Daughters, which is also on the shortlist. The documentary shortlist. That I remember when the shortlist came out, that caused a little bit of a stir. We do have Four Daughters shortlisted for documentary, but not The Mother of All Lies. Just a note. But anyway, continue.
That's all right. So we have The Mother of All Lies.
And did you mention Japan's Perfect Days?
Not yet. But yeah, there is Japan's Perfect Days, definitely. And from what I've been hearing and what everyone is telling me, and they're correct, that this is very much a perfect film, and it will herald perfect days for Wim Wenders once again. So I'm actually kind of really happy to see Return of a Master kind of, back in the fold. It's always good when we get to see one of the old masters kind of return back in the fold and getting critical praise once again. I'm sorry, Wong Kar-wai.
What if Wenders is the surprise international director?
Yeah.
This is sort of what I was talking about earlier. There's just so much spillover potential. We might get like him and director and Juliette Binoche and supporting actress. And I mean, I doubt Koji Yakusho's making it in, but it's not impossible. So, I mean, we really may see like this sort of, this may be a benchmark year in terms of international representation.
The only thing that sort of holds me back slightly is I don't know how many people have seen Perfect Days. It's probably one of the lesser available and seen international films from the category so far. I know a lot of the other films have got quite a lot of plays in festivals and such, but Perfect Days, not so much. I know, Ron, you've been trying to see it as well. It's not that easily accessible. So that's the one thing that might hold it back in terms of how many people get to see it. But from the people who have, I think almost universally everyone's loved it. And that's really good. I just hope it gets more easily accessible come, award nomination season, so that people can see it and nominate, because once they see it, it is a no-brainer that it should get nominated. It's a very, very strong film. That's how I see it anyway. But what do I know? I hate Totem, and I hate other films from this category. I hate Anatomy of a Fall, so clearly my critical credentials are in threat anyway. So,
Okay, just to wrap up the list quickly, from Spain, we have Society of the Snow. That's another movie, by the way, I forgot to mention, that could appear in multiple categories.
Oh, really?
Maybe it gets a surprise Best Picture nomination.
Is it really gathering momentum?
It showed up. It showed up on a bunch of shortlists, like I think for score, like places where it wasn't really expected. Let's see. Society of the Snow it showed up on the visual effects shortlist. makeup and hairstyling.
Mhm.
Yeah, like places where I'm pretty sure it wasn't expected to pop up.
Yeah,
So,
I
I
mean
mean, that could
that is
be
actually really surprising.
a sign.
Yeah,
And I
and
have heard great things about Michael Giacchino's score
yeah,
for that film. I haven't seen it yet. It is Spain's submission over The Beasts, which I mean, I
which
thought was really, really strong. I don't, I
uh,
mean, I could see Society of the Snow and be like, okay, Spain made the right decision, but
now I've
I
talked
have a
to
hard
people.
time believing it'll improve.
I've talked to people who've seen both, and I think this is apart more than the Anatomy of a Fall snub, which makes sense to me, because really the
Yeah.
Taste of Things is a more palatable film. It's easier to digest. I would say
Guess
that,
we didn't get all our puns out of the way.
yeah, I would say that the Beast getting snubbed for Society of the Snow of all. I mean, just with, do I want to watch a film with that title? No. I mean, that is my kind of snobbishness coming through, because I'm just like, just by reading that title, I don't want to watch that film. So there you go. The Beast, for the other hand, sign me
It
up.
also would have been a good alternative title for Yellow Jackets, um, which I think is like, part of that story is based on this like rugby team or whatever that got stranded in the mountains. Okay, and closing out the list, let's see, we have, like I mentioned, Four Daughters from Tunisia, 20 Days in Mariupol from Ukraine, another documentary, and of
Yeah.
course, the big one, like even in this, banner year for international cinema, I still think this title stands above the rest in terms of momentum. The Zone of Interest, which is being submitted by the United Kingdom, but that it's almost irrelevant because when do UK movies get submitted as international features? This is just one of
Yeah.
those weird cases where it's like it's financed by companies in the UK, but it's in German and it takes
Mm.
place in Poland, and that actually may be a good
Exactly.
segue into our sort of broad philosophical discussion about the category. Every year we hear people call for reform and say that it's wrong that only one movie gets submitted from every country. And it's like wrong, especially because of the way distribution works now. It's
Yeah.
sort of weird to it keeps a lot of movies out of the conversation because they can't safely be attributed to a single country.
I agree.
My take on this has always been I agree with the one movie per country rule just because we want to avoid any nation being overrepresented. However, what I would change, um, I don't think it should be up to some like national institution to pick and submit a film. I think the Academy, the international feature branch should just I believe we should watch as many of these films as possible and ourselves. I mean, that might, even though I don't like Anatomy of a Fall, it's very possible that were voters just given like a bunch of French films to choose from, they would have gone with Anatomy of a Fall. And it just sucks that so many films are disqualified because it's ultimately up to that country's, art and culture
Yeah.
institutions. So
Interesting.
yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
for the sake of fairness, I would keep it to the one movie per country rule. I just wouldn't leave the decision with
that country.
that like institution. Yeah, I think we should just absorb, consume as much of the cinema as possible and sort of make our own decisions. And then maybe, we would have like Perfect Days and Monster running.
Oh my
Or
God.
and
Sorry, I just
even though I think, wait, didn't I
went
just
into like
both
cinematic
movies
place
are
for 2 seconds when you said Perfect Days and Monster, which,
I
you know
think I
what?
just sort of logically violated my own rule there because both movies are considered Japanese, right?
Yeah, that is
Even
correct.
though
Even though,
Yeah, I mean, obviously,
even
Perfect
though,
Days is from a German director.
yeah, exactly. And this is actually the one thing that you highlighted, and this is sort of I don't know what the solution to this is, but it is a bigger problem, or at least this is how postmodern distribution and funding works. A lot of the thing and a lot of the criteria for deciding whether a film belongs to a particular country is not the people making it. So the director can be of whatever origin. You know, it is who's putting in the money to make the film, which is eventually deciding whether the film is, British or Armenian or Japanese. I don't think that's accurate. A perfect days, sorry, perfect days, not a perfect days. Perfect days is not a Japanese film. There's nothing essentially Japanese about it. I mean, it is a Wim Wenders film.
Well, it takes place in
Yeah,
Tokyo, and
yeah, but I
it's
mean,
in Japanese.
it,
Yeah.
well, once you see it, you're just like, much actually. Not much of the dialogue is in Japanese. There's
Really?
not much dialogue in the film to begin with.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's
I see.
interesting
I
how
see.
Wenders gets around the linguistic barrier. But the thing is, if you're talking about how much much Japanese a film is, Monster is clearly way more Japanese in its sort of outlook, language, screenplay, in how many sort of dialogues of Japanese are there. So it's if we consider film to be a director's medium, there is a fundamental problem for me that a film is being decided by who's putting in the money, and that is deciding whether the film is categorically belonging to a certain country or not. Uh, I just think there should be a hybrid international feature category, which isn't linked to particular countries as such, because there is no way to
Yeah.
determine whether a film is particularly more Armenian or Finnish or German or Japanese. You can just say Perfect Days
Yeah, that
because
line
of
is being
Wender's
more and more blurred these days.
with Wender's sensibility. Where Perfect Days is more Japanese, sorry, it's more German in form than the Teacher's Lounge, essentially, because it's very impressionistic in that sense. Anyway, so
Yeah, and the Teacher's Lounge is, I think, from a Turkish director.
yeah, uh,
So, I mean, because it's just so difficult in, modern day Europe to really segment these films. I don't know.
and
There
the
needs to
bigger
be some reform. I
the
don't know
big
what it should be, but the current system isn't quite sufficient. It doesn't sufficiently represent the full breadth of international cinema.
I agree. And look, the current problem, I think what this is highlighting is that it's becoming more and more difficult for filmmakers to make films on their own capacity. You require multiple sources of funding, which are minuscule from multiple sources. So there are co-productions with 4 or 5 nations coming together to kind of fund one
Yeah.
film, and who has a monopoly over that film in the end? It's
And
really hard to
even
say.
in terms of language, I mean, I don't know that I totally believe this, but some have claimed that Anatomy of a Fall wasn't nominated because, I mean, so much of it is in English and some of it is even in German. And like, I don't think that's the reason because there are some other like
Yeah, and
pretty credible reasons for that movie not getting
yeah.
nominated for one. And I just want to go back to the 2022 race. Like, to my credit, I never thought Decision to Leave was getting nominated because that's just not a genre that the Academy responds to. Now, I wouldn't say that Anatomy of a Fall is as much of a mystery thriller as Decision to Leave. That movie's a lot more genre. An Anatomy of a Fall, I guess, is more of like a character study. Um, Nevertheless, it does still belong to a category of films that the Academy in the past has just not been quick to embrace. Nevertheless, I just
I
wanted to
agree.
say that with international films now, with so many different, I mean, with movies that have, like, for example, I saw Disco Boy this year with Franz Rogowski, and that's a movie with, several languages and several production companies, and it's like, is that an Italian film? Is that what else? I mean, I think
I
it's
mean,
like
I
a
mean,
weird
let's
cross
take
section between
another
France and Italy.
let's take another Frank Rogowski film, one of your favorites, Passages. In an alternate timeline, let's say Passages were to be nominated or shortlisted. Uh, which country would you even pick? It's set in
Yeah, Ira
France, set
Sachs
in
is American.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's mostly in English, set in Paris. I mean, it's complicated. Just
yeah,
uh,
and like I think uh, illustrating this point well is The Zone of Interest, which is from a British director, set in Poland, mostly featuring German, and it's being submitted by the UK, which is not really a country we consider to, movies from the UK are just nominated alongside Hollywood films. So
yeah,
it's just kind of weird. And yeah, with distribution realities being what they are in 2023, the system we have in place feels a little short-sighted.
and yeah. So we don't really have a solution of how to fix the system. We just know it's broken. So much like every political hack at university, we just claim that the system is broken. We don't know how to fix it. So there we
Right.
go.
Without actually, I mean, I definitely don't think that, like, removing the one I don't think the problem will be solved
I agree.
by removing the
One film per country
one
rule.
film per country rule.
Yeah.
There is some sense to that, but I don't know. I just wish they weren't the ones taking it. I mean, and there are political reasons for that too, right? Like we saw a year ago. I mean, no, I mean, fine. RRR is a good example. That's not really
Yeah,
that wasn't due to political controversy, but
yeah.
a movie that was so beloved that couldn't really compete in a category it would have potentially won.
Yeah.
Well, probably no. Let me back up. All Quiet on the Western Front getting that Best Picture nomination, like. I don't think, RRR
No,
wasn't nominated for, and it could have been, right? Even though it wasn't
could have
submitted, it
been,
still
yeah,
could have competed,
could have
but it didn't
competed.
make it. So probably
Yeah,
wouldn't have won international feature. But another good example, I mean, a movie you like, Jafar Panahi's No
the
Bears,
Bears, yeah,
right? Like this filmmaker was imprisoned for making the movie. Like, obviously Iran wasn't going to select that as their international feature submission.
yeah.
So should we really be leaving it up to the sort of political calculus of some of these countries? Another good
Yeah.
example, Joyland.
Yes,
Um, a really good movie, by the way,
really good movie.
that wasn't nominated despite, wasn't it like, if my memory serves me,
Won the queer
well,
palm. Uh,
also the first, I think, Pakistani film to
yep,
ever play at Cannes.
yep.
And then there was like a whole thing with it being banned. And you would think that, okay, because the movie is being sort of suppressed, that it might, how shall I put this? This actually leads into another
Yeah,
uh, sort of interesting conversation, which is that the international feature category, you would think that they go for, like, very socially important, socially relevant movies, but that hasn't actually happened
no,
in the past as much as you
because
would think.
the thing
Like,
is,
they're not activists, which I suppose is commendable, but like again, Joyland, No Bears, Klondike, I think from Ukraine. Like you would assume that with everything going on, that Klondike would be a shoo-in because it has all of this social import. That
Yeah.
didn't happen, which is why I'm not sold on 20 Days in Mariupol getting
Yeah.
nominated, even though it was shortlisted. Because when you think that they're going to vote for the thing
And
that's
and
making
and
an
and, and
important political statement, they don't.
look, I can speak to definitely, uh, with an Indian background, and I can speak to some of the Indian submissions that have been picked. And the reason for that is definitely political. It is very much films that represent the status quo, which they have no bearing on, whether or not they cross over. There was huge uproar. Remember when the Lunchbox, which crossed over. This is way before RRR. Lunchbox crossed over a long time ago, and that was supposed to be when Irfan Khan was still alive, and this is before his roles in Jurassic World and everything else, and then he was everywhere. But that was a film from which he crossed over, and that was so beloved that everyone thought that would be India's submission, but it wasn't. Uh, and that was probably India's best chance of getting a shortlist or a nomination in a long time. Even this year, the movie they picked, a very safe choice, which wasn't a no real lobbying to get other voters to see that film, no real sort of promotional
What did they
campaigns
pick
around
this
it.
year?
I think they picked a film called 2018. It is bad, is an
And
understatement.
what would you have selected instead?
What would I have selected? There's just so many interesting films this year. I mean, just look at The Monk and the Gun from Bhutan. That's a really interesting film. Uh, and that's been picked uh, despite that film not being very politically aligned to what Bhutan's kind of regime is at the moment. So it's interesting how some of these films are lining up. What would I have picked from India this year? There's plenty of choices. There's a beautiful film called Which Color, which is filmed in black and white about a small little Muslim community, and that played at the Melbourne International Film Festival. It traveled really well at the festival circuit, uh, but obviously, I don't think the current regime is amenable to picking that kind of a film because it is talking about a minority, sort of within that country. So we don't want to spotlight any films that talk about Muslim narratives right now, given the very right wing nationalist government in power. So it's
And
complicated.
the way the category is currently set up, it's weird because on the one hand, the Oscars are this like force for social justice, but on the
Yeah,
other, it's sort of playing ball with, regimes that
look,
most of us probably would not find
I think
just.
we've been skirting around the issue, but I think we've kind of hit the nail on the head now. It's it's a fact, and it's an uncomfortable fact that we have to probably contend with. It's that a lot of the regimes in other parts of the world probably do not align with Western democratic or liberal values, and there is a clash, especially when we look at the kind of cinema that we may want to champion or we think is worthy of kind of championing, doesn't really translate well in their home countries. I know the Indian film I'm talking about hasn't got a chance at release or distribution in India. It's not going to get picked up apart from festivals. I know the director has no real hope of that happening either. Uh, so that's it. Once the festival circuit ends, all he kind of hopes is that he can recover the money, the budget that was spent, so he can make another film. That's it. There is no real hope for any kind of
Yeah.
release in his own country, which is
And it
really
just
sad.
seems like those are the movies the movies that stand in opposition to these problematic regimes, we should probably be like there was actual social value in recognizing Joyland.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
saying that's the only reason to nominate something, but
Talking about Joyland, really interesting anecdote. So I saw Joyland last year when it played Sydney Film Festival, and the whole Indian and Pakistani community kind of came out in force because of the few kind of South Asian films sort of playing in as an official selection. And and the funny thing is, you don't often get a lot of prep material to read about the film before you go in. A lot of these films you go in blind in film festivals, you and I know. Uh, and I was chuckling under my breath and trying not to laugh when you could see hordes and hordes of Indian and Pakistani background people just exiting the theater once they realized the actual subject matter of that film. And
yeah.
they were just cursing under their breath as if this is unnatural. This is the kind of film. How dare they? Because they brought kids and families and stuff, right? And they were suddenly very scandalized to notice, I don't want to show this sort of thing to my kids. This is unnatural. This sort of thing. Films shouldn't exist. Should be ashamed of yourself and whatnot.
And that seems
Probably
like
one of the few times where the Indians and Pakistanis could agree with each other is when they saw homophobia, combined in their homophobia, sort of erupting. So it was nice to see they could agree on something. Anyway, that's
and that just seems like the type of thing. I mean, sort of on top of shedding light on an important issue, Joyland is quite good. I don't think the
it's.
only
I mean, that's
reason
the
to
thing.
nominate it.
It's
It's a
not.
good movie.
I agree. So this is the other thing. We're not just saying, and let's just clarify this, that films should be nominated only for their social justice value. These are also, they
Yeah.
happen to be technically proficient films. Joyland is a technically amazing film to think that it's the first time
So it's very
for
well shot.
for a first time filmmaker, there is so much assuredness in terms of what kind of film he wants to make. I'm really impressed. So no, this is not just because these films carry some social value. These are amazing films that happen to have these social values that we should champion, and they get withheld. So, and that's really sad.
Yeah, it just seems like we are enabling the, I don't know, sensorial tendencies of some of these nations. And I don't know, I feel like that's not what the Academy Awards should be about. And maybe that in and of itself is like the best reason to reform the category so
I
that
agree.
countries aren't picking films, but we are.
I mean, honestly,
And I mean that if the every year again, like, the Academy Awards does a lot, the people who represent it, winners, nominees, publicists, etc. There's so much bloviating about social justice. And I think one way to really sort of put our money where our mouth is to, I don't know, nominate something like No Bears, because I mean, instead of, Joaquin Phoenix winning an award and going up there and saying this kind of lukewarm nonsense about social justice, I don't know. I just think institutionally that would be a much more significant statement
I
to
absolutely agree.
nominate something like Joyland or No Bears, despite the fact that their native countries are actively trying to suppress the releases of these films.
Yeah, because without that, it's just empty pontificating, right? It's just posturing in the end. And because it's a simple question, hand on heart, can I really say that the films that have been featured here from their respective countries are the best of the best that they have to offer from those respective countries? No, that's not true. Regardless of the shortlist and how many films have made it, that's not the point. Some films make it or some don't, some get culled. But even from this list, are all of these films representative of the best films of their own respective countries? Probably not. So yeah, that means something
I
has
don't
to
know.
change.
Maybe it's just maybe I'm being naive and idealistic and
It's the
thinking
second
that
last day of
voters would
2023.
actually see.
I think we're allowed to be somewhat optimistic and hopeful about
Okay.
2024. I mean, that's
Well,
yeah. Look at it.
I was just going to say that like is it naive to think that voter unless if countries aren't kind of doing the work for Academy voters, will they themselves seek out all of these French, Italian,
Probably,
Indian films to make
probably
their
not.
decisions? Or do they kind of need that to sort of isolate one title and then it just simplifies their
Probably
job?
not.
I don't know.
No, probably not. But I think there is a sort of coherent way of getting a varied and diverse shortlist together. I mean, we have a network of film programmers who work round the clock, whose job it is to practically seek out films from diverse countries. They can curate a shortlist from each country and work together to do that. And the voters can just watch these shortlisted films from respective countries. But there are ways of doing it. I don't know if there is, once again, political will, because it requires actual change. And sometimes the Academy likes to pat itself on the back for perceived change rather than actual change. So I'm not sure whether there is. I mean, I'd like to, because this is broken. This clearly doesn't work. Even though I do love so many of these films, I think there's a better way of doing it. I'm just not sure whether there is any inclination to do it. Maybe we just live in a world where we just don't want to, disturb the equilibrium. So that's how it is. We want these other nations to be open markets for our films. So that's how it is. It is once again a question of
Yeah.
business.
You definitely you that's definitely I think you hit the nail on the head there,
I mean,
unfortunately.
I didn't want to say it like that because it
But
just makes me feel
that's
sad.
probably what it boils down to. Yeah.
India is a big market. It's a booming market. There's so many people there. The Indian diaspora is expanding. We don't want to piss off a whole bunch of Indians by selecting something that, goes against their conservative beliefs, or same with China. China
But
is,
it's
is, is
just
a big
like,
market as well. Same,
of
similar
course,
ideas.
yeah. We're so inclined to criticize our own system. And I think we in part do that because there's no actual threat of repercussion. LeBron James can say all the things he wants about America's broken legal system. And we celebrate him for his bravery, but there's nothing brave about criticizing America. I mean, or the West. I think that if anything just elevates your platform. Whereas but of course, when LeBron James was kind of questioned about China, there suddenly all of that bravery, that outspokenness dissipated. And the same, I guess I'm just saying that the Oscars are blundering in the same way, where we are we believe in social justice when it's convenient, but when it actually might make a difference, when it, in places where filmmakers are being imprisoned for creating art, it's it it's just it's very, I don't know, hypocritical and frustrating.
No, that's a fair point. We believe in social justice when it's convenient.
When it's safe. Yeah.
When it's safe. Sounds like your review of American fiction. Anyway, it's but it's absolutely right. I mean, not your review of American fiction. I digress in that, but you're absolutely right about this. It's correct. Okay. Now that we've addressed the thorny issues, should we do this? Should we pick out what our likely lineup might look like?
Yeah. I actually just have like a quick comment. I don't know if I'll be able to organically bring it into this conversation, but
let's do it.
Like every European or international feature that I've seen, it's I don't know if it's just because of what is tracking here, or if international cinema is just so hyper focused on these issues. But like everything seems to be about xenophobia, uh, uh, provincialism versus cosmopolitanism, um, like very sort of broad political issues on the local level. And I'm just thinking about what I've seen, and it's like The Beasts, RMN,
Yeah.
um, About Dry Grasses. These are just three examples, but they're just all so like, I don't know, like About Dry Grasses and The Beasts are very similar in that regard. Both are about, yeah, like this sort of more educated person clashing with narrow-minded villagers. Um, Again, like all of these stories are like microcosms of broader, political issues, many of them having to do with globalization. Like
Yeah.
the Beast is about um, a community debating whether or not windmills should be built on their land. Um, the Old Oak, right? There's another one. Like there are
Yes.
scenes in The Beasts which it's just like, oh my God, I haven't seen The Old Oak, but I'm so sure like that's what that movie is basically doing. Like
Oh yeah.
people getting together in a pub and discussing these sort
Oh
of
yeah. That is the old.
local issues that speak to much broader like problems, in Europe at the moment, and controversies.
Well,
And
I wonder if
is it
we're
that the
tackling.
movies aren't trickling out? Am I not watching the right stuff? But it's like everything I'm seeing is all sort of delving into the same issues. I mean, we were talking before we started recording that the Teacher's Lounge, About Dry Grasses, and Monster
Yeah.
all kind of tackle the same
Yeah.
subject matter.
I'm glad you didn't say
I
theme.
mean, yeah, the education system is not a theme. Um, yeah, we've had conversations about the misuse of that word.
But yeah, I think there is definitely some tension between individual will versus sort of a mechanical sort of, it's fate versus free will represented through machinery versus individual will, essentially. Or sort of.
Oh, another movie, by the way, that fits that category. What we're both talking about, Full Time, which is
Oh
an
yeah.
excellent movie, and it's about a person dealing with like protests across Paris, and yeah, I don't know. I guess I don't know. Maybe international filmmakers, and I know it's what I just said is stupid because, of course, it's not a monolith, but at least the stuff that's coming out here, it all, I don't know, maybe it feels like they do social realism better than we do because a lot of these films aren't like, I wouldn't say they're aesthetically unambitious, but they're very pared down.
That
And it
is.
really does seem like these movies are, I don't want to say that they're overly political, but there's like this working class conscience there, maybe, and perhaps that may be explained by how decentralized filmmaking is in other parts of the world, whereas everything kind of here comes
Yeah.
through, for the most part, Hollywood. So maybe we don't get some of those like,
I mean, you say.
not that there's a lack in humanism, but there's a, I don't want to say that Hollywood films are overly corporatist, but there is,
But Disney does own
I
everything,
don't
so
know.
I kind of. But it's true. I mean, there is
I
a
just
level of.
find that internationally there's like this, I don't know. Humanism is not the right word. Maybe I'll come back to it when I figure out
But
what I want to say,
you've kind
please.
you've kind of hit what you I sort of I'm able to kind of gather from what you're trying to say. It's so film I love, Fallen Leaves, for example. Uh, that kind of proletariat kind of film about two people working gig-hour contracts and a love story centering around those people who barely are sort of subsisting. I don't see that. And maybe Kelly Reichardt can make one if she wants to. But apart from that, I don't see anyone who really wants to sort of work with those kind of protagonists. I mean, class awareness and class consciousness on film doesn't seem to be really something that excites American filmmakers today at this point.
Our movie, see, here's where it's difficult because like our movies are very, I think, class conscious, but there's a difference where like in our movies, and Western sort of Hollywood streamlined films, it's like, yeah, they're class conscious, but they also more often than not feature protagonists that through their sort of charm and will can overcome whatever is holding them down because socially, politically. Whereas international films seem much more aware of like systems and how maybe we are like kind of helpless within them. And there isn't this like, it's not focused on just the sort of the forces of individualism. I think that there's more of an acknowledgement in a movie like Full Time or, a movie with like, I'm forgetting the title, but with Vincent Linden, who's made like several movies that like get, because our movies do delve into these topics, but in a much more kind of, it's always about the person and how if you just work hard enough and try hard enough, and if you're talented and charismatic enough, then you can kind of come out on top. And what I'm seeing on the international side of things, again, not to talk about international film as if it's a monolith, but just for the sake of keeping this conversation simple, I would say that they're it's not that they're hopeless, but they're more realistic. And they don't lean into the kind of wish fulfillment, the kind of individualism that we see on, our side of the pond. Even though you and I are on different sides of the pond, but I mean, culturally speaking, we are absorbing a lot of the same media.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I don't want to be the person making this argument because I think it's a little cliched and easy. But at the same time, like one could maybe say that the focus on individualism in Western films is like, I don't know, a corporatist agenda or something. Like by focusing on the individual, we are able to ignore broader social problems.
Yeah.
And it does, like, right, if you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps like that I can see how that kind of messaging is convenient for, I don't know, a major sort of corporate force like Hollywood and all of its studios. And again, maybe because in Europe and in other parts of the world, filmmaking is less centralized, there isn't this wariness toward, I don't know, depicting like sort of collective, not that our movies don't do this, but it's just done in a different way.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I guess I'm saying that those movies are better at showing like the collective struggle, maybe something that, a movie that's more comfortable with the idea of union. I'm rambling because this is a very hard thing to talk about, especially like I'm not a political science guru. Like I don't know how these systems work in other places, but it's just a trend I've kind of noticed over the years. Like when I saw Coda, I thought, okay, well, like here's a people who say that our movies don't really talk about like the working class. It's like, well, that's obviously not true. Movies are made for working class people for the most part, and so the ideas in them
But they're still
usually
aspirational.
do
Yeah.
satisfy.
But they're still aspirational
Yeah,
from a American or sort of our perspective. It is supposed to tell a working class to aspire to something, whereas a European sensibility sometimes is more about the working class that they might see at the pub or they might see around them. So it's like, these are some people that you might meet otherwise on the street. And part of it, I think, is the sort of late stage capitalism, neoliberal DNA that's being encoded in us that we can better our own circumstances regardless of what is happening. That
and sort of what
in
you
a
said,
very sort
maybe,
of pursuit
and
of happiness, Will Smith kind of way, which
yeah,
I don't know if
which is like that is
the
sort of you would
quintessential,
think like,
yeah,
oh no, yeah, you would think like, oh no, that's about the working class, but not really, because it is ultimately saying that the responsibility lies with the individual. And something you said that I agree with, the movies I'm speaking about on the international side, again, I hate what I'm doing. I'm creating this false binary, like our movies and international movies. But again, just for the sake of keeping this as simple as possible, um, there is a better sort of focus on the machinery, on
mhm.
social machinery. And I guess maybe in that sense, I don't know. Yeah, like they're better at social realism. They're better at sort of making sociological arguments, whereas our movies more often than not kind of zero in on like individual will. Even though, I mean, the movie I just mentioned, Full Time, it is really about individual will.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just about the single mother who has to like literally run everywhere because of
but but
a
it,
massive transit strike.
but in full time, she's still operating within a larger community where other people have to take decisions which are impacting her. It's not just whatever decision I take is going to influence my future. Whatever decision I take and my interactions with these other people, which I don't know how they'll respond, will influence my future. There is a level of sort of, community also influencing and deciding whatever your immediate or long-term future is going to be. I think that aspect of community is completely erased from American film, as much as I can see. And part of it has been, I think my thesis is superhero movies have contributed to that. They have elevated individual to the point that you individual will, individual capacity, individual vigilantism. You are your own superhero. Find your inner superhero within you, and you can overcome all our odds. It is selling that fantasy at a
I'm
large
all for
scale.
shitting on superhero movies, but I think this sort of tendency existed
Oh yeah, yeah,
way
wait. Yeah,
before
this is
the
just
dawn of Marvel.
yeah, yeah. I mean, this
Yeah.
is just an example of that being
Maybe this is just
corporatized
where
to the
like
point. Yeah,
that maybe this is just like the logical endpoint of all of that American
yeah, yeah.
exceptionalism. Maybe it just sort of inevitably leads to there.
No, but I think from a broader point of view, I completely agree that there is a difference in the fabric of these films. I mean, that's the best word I can think of. The texture of how you experience both these films and what you take away from these films, even if they deal with the same topics or subject areas, are going to be very different. And experientially, they affect you differently. And what you are expected to take away, those takeaways are meaningfully, meaningfully different. Now that we've addressed that, I think it brings me to finally looking at our categories and our choices that we've made. What do you think from our
Shall
15?
we do some predictions?
Yes,
Okay.
from our 15
Um,
feature shortlists, what predictions do you think? Who's going to make it? Who's not?
I haven't written them down, so we're just going to kind of do this in real time, the way we've
Yeah,
just been sort of winging this entire episode.
yeah.
Okay. What do I think is getting in? this category, you know, kind of like documentary, sometimes The Favorite just doesn't make it in, and it just kind
Really?
of throws you for a loop.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, a year ago, everyone was like convinced that Decision to Leave was getting nominated, even
Yeah,
though I don't think it was just weird because like Park Chan-wook had never been embraced by the Academy before. And
that's
usually,
true.
and then which is fine, but then the movie that people thought would help him cross over was not, when that happens, like we, talked about Christopher Nolan a lot and, with him, you see how, like, yes, a popular, respected filmmaker can crash the Oscars when they make a movie that sort of falls in line with their, well, I mean, okay, that scratch that. Because, I mean, of course, Inception was very successful. I guess what I'm saying is, even something like maybe Yorgos Lanthimos, right? It's like, yes, you're respected, you're popular, at least, with higher brow crowds. But until you make something like The Favorite, you're not really like invited to the
Yeah,
party. And I just didn't see how Decision to Leave was more Academy friendly
that's
than
true.
all of these other movies that like never sort of got
That's
him
true.
far.
Actually,
Um,
talking of Park Chan-wook, the 4K restoration, 20th anniversary of Old Boy,
Old Boy.
currently on Netflix, I believe. So check it out because that
Good
film
to
holds
know.
up.
Good to know.
That film holds up really well. It's in cinemas as well, I
Okay,
think, in
so
Australia. But yeah. Anyway, little shout out. But
okay, the zone of interest is obviously getting in, right? Like
yeah,
that's the likeliest film of all of
yeah.
these.
I mean, I have that as a
So
lock.
the zone of interest, um, Society of the Snow.
Ooh,
I mean,
okay.
Netflix is behind it. It's popped up on all of these short lists. Like, I don't know, is there like some obvious example I'm not thinking of where it's like, yeah, it popped up on a bunch of short lists, but still failed to.
Yeah.
What one of our listeners will tell me I'm a moron because like maybe I don't know, Decision to Leave is that example, but I don't remember that popping up on many short lists.
I think that would be our
Okay,
decision to
I
leave the podcast. Anyway.
I think the taste of things is probably getting in. Yeah, Zone of Interest, Society of the Snow. No. Okay. Here they are in order. Zone of Interest, Society of the Snow, Perfect Days. That's three.
Mhm.
The Taste of Things and Fallen Leaves. That's my five. Now, what does that leave off? The Teacher's Lounge. Okay. I mean, I don't, doesn't, I don't think it has to get nominated. I mean, it has Sony Pictures Classics behind it. So
Yep.
I don't know, that might work in its favor. Totem. I mean, a
Mm.
lot of people like that movie.
Yeah, it's
And I
right.
think Leela Avilés has been nominated before. Let me just
It's
double check. Yeah, was The Chambermaid nominated for? Yeah, the film was. Oh, it was chosen as the I see. Yes, it was submitted but not nominated. Um, you know, the ones I'm most confident in, I don't know, could Fallen Leaves be like that weird snub that,
this is definitely his most beloved so far in terms of
yeah.
crossover appeal. He makes sad Finnish films. That's
I've heard great things about The Mother of All Lies, but that movie wasn't shortlisted for documentary. Is there a good reason for that?
uh it's still a hybrid creative nonfiction documentary, so I think if you're a purist, you might put it in a fiction category and not a documentary category.
Maybe.
Gotland is pretty
But
deep.
I think
I don't think it's once again it's too cold, too detached. for it to work. It's not enough heart. If you know what I mean, for it to kind of. If
Also,
if I'm picking Godland, I might as well pick Totem. Totem has more of a chance in terms of how much of a obviously manipulative film
weepy
it
it
is.
is. Yeah,
Actually, hanky
yeah,
weepy. Yeah.
yeah. I don't know. I mean, like, do they care about star power in this category? Like, if they do, then The Promised Land has a shot. I mean, Mads Mikkelsen
Yeah, look,
is obviously the headlining
Promised Land
star there.
is a film I haven't seen. Try to see it. Try to find ways of seeing it. So I have no idea whether it's a good or a bad film. One of the few films we've missed out on so far. So yeah, Io Capitano
Okay,
from
so
people who have seen it have said it's a really really good film, and it might have the ingredients in terms of sort of a refugee narrative that might carry through. So it has that kind of emotional currency. So that's one that I've been told might be a dark horse. Uh, but yeah, I mean, for me,
what are your prediction
the
ranked? Yeah,
the three lock-ins are Zone of Interest. I mean,
of course.
it. I don't see how it's not getting in. The very fact that the
Yeah, I mean,
UK,
we're talking about it unless it doesn't, unless we're surprised and it like doesn't end up competing, it doesn't end up getting into picture and director. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's theoretically possible that on nominations morning, the Zone of Interest like severely underperforms. But if it's going to be the contender we're currently predicting, yeah, it's getting into international and more likely than not winning the category.
yeah, I mean, that's that. Second, Fallen Leaves. I do think it's the most accessible film out of all of the films in terms of how easy it is to really get behind. It is very
You mean the
accessible.
Zone of Interest isn't accessible?
I
Do
don't
you
know.
think that, are you saying that the Zone of Interest is a cold movie? It's just a down the middle like family drama. The family, just happens to be Nazis, but that's a minor detail. I would be fascinated, like if we could find this one like adult human who has no knowledge of history, I would just be fascinated to like hear what they have to say about the movie if you sat them down in front of it. Like they would just be like, what? Why is like again like just no historical context? They'd just be like, what? What's so significant about this woman trying on a fur coat? Like, what's you know what are they doing across the wall that it's causing so much sort of
Yeah.
stress?
I mean, there are aspects in the film which still, aren't very clear either. There are sort of theories around it, but even despite that, it's fun to kind of think if it'd be fun to mess with someone's head, be like, oh, it's okay. It's just little family drama about family trying to build a Garden of Eden. It's okay.
Yeah, and when it's a very middle class story. We were just talking about movies that address the working class, and yeah, it's about a guy who gets a transfer, and his wife really wants to stay in their
Stay
home and raise
and
their
and
children. I
this.
think that's a very, very relatable subject. Again, they just happen to be Nazis, but that's not really relevant.
I mean, yeah, Nazis are humans too, right? I mean, could that have
In
been
case anyone doesn't understand, we are being facetious. Please don't come at us and say, if anyone is even listening, and they probably aren't, please don't come at us and say that we are like humanizing Nazis. That is not
I
what we're
mean,
doing.
yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we have to live in a world where we have to explain humor. And if you,
Well, we're also not, they can't see our faces. So perhaps I can kind of slightly understand
I don't think
why there would be room for.
I don't think I've perfected my deadpan voice yet, so I think it's quite obvious when I'm giving it away.
Yes.
So that's all right. Okay, Zone of
Okay,
Interest,
good.
Fallen Leaves, Perfect Days. These are 1, 2, 3, and I think if something has to change that, I have to give up my critical credentials. That's probably how it is going to happen. And 4 and 5 are really up for the taking. Maybe Taste of Things in terms of how it's getting momentum, uh, especially with Juliette Binoche and just generally how accessible it is. Once again, I'm going by accessibility. And really, France picked it over Anatomy of a Fall. I mean, it has to be some kind of. They better get nominated, otherwise it'll be egg on their faces kind of a thing. Just like, oh, we didn't pick the one film they said is the best film of 2023, and we picked this one. At least give us a nomination.
I don't know. Maybe do you think that has something? They did the brave thing in 2021. They submitted Titan, and it didn't get nominated. So
because Titan was,
I don't know.
Was the counselor with someone trying to have car sex. It was that. That was my takeaway from that film.
You didn't like Titan?
No, I walked out of it.
I'm a fan.
I
love Titan. Like, not even a movie that I like. I don't even think it's an entirely satisfying film, but just the visual style, Vincent Lindon's performance. I mean, that tracking shot set to Doing It to Death, like it's just a movie with so much energy. Oh my God, that like fight scene after the orgy.
Okay, I guess
I just love that movie visually.
I can see our friendship fraying in real time. No, it's all good.
Yeah, I mean, but to go back, oh no, it's not all good.
No.
Our friendship is sort of on the outs because you don't like Titan, and I vehemently disagree. Obviously, Anatomy of a Fall is.
Yeah, and I don't like Air, so there is that too. It's okay. We'll just go with Titan.
Contrary to what people say, you don't pick your friends. Yeah, I mean, Anatomy of a Fall obviously isn't as risky of a choice as Titan. I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know. Maybe their calculus was like, well, we know people love Anatomy of a Fall. We know it's probably getting nominated for screenplay and best leading actress and best picture. So maybe they thought, why not kind of cheat the system a little bit and have 2 French films in the mix? Maybe that was the thinking, because I mean, if you wanted to, I don't know, would it win the category? Would it win the category from the zone of interest?
No,
I'm not a believer that Anatomy of a Fall can make it into Best Picture, and a lot of people are predicting Justine Triet for a directing nomination. I don't really see that, but I could be wrong. Would Anatomy have taken the category?
Okay.
I don't know.
So
question worth asking.
Yeah. Zone of Interest.
It has been doing really well with Precursors, especially with its screenplay.
Yeah. The Zone of Interest, Fallen Leaves, Perfect Days, Taste of Things, and I do have Mother of All Lies as my pick because I'm partial towards that film. I think any of the other films have a shot. It's really an open race.
But you always get those like really weird inclusions. I mean,
I also think because it's Morocco.
I wouldn't be surprised if like The Monk and the Gun like popped up, and you're just like, okay, like that was out of nowhere.
The other reason why I'm talking Mother of All Lies, we were talking about posturing from the Oscars. It is a submission from Morocco. Look at the current situation in the Arab world. If we have to give them an olive branch and leaf, we're like, oh, look, we recognize cinema from your side of the world. Here's the nomination. Ta-da!
I don't know. You might be making sort of my. You might be committing the same error in judgment that I did in years past. Like the category is not as sort of geared toward how shall I put this? That it they don't make like the morally imperative picks as often as you would think.
If it's not, then the most likely, if the Mother of All Lies, which is like a personal pick, not a logical pick, if that's not the case, then I'm thinking Totem might get in. And even though I'd hate that,
Okay.
I would hate it. I would practically shoot myself in the foot with an actual gun. But I think, it might actually happen, and I might actually cry because
Yeah, I mean, it is like Totem would, if it were an American movie, it would be like probably getting a bunch of nominations. You know what I mean? Like it's just the type of thing that the Academy would go for.
But also, like just outside of these shortlist films, one of the films that I was kind of sad that it didn't make through was Rodrigo Moreno's.
Wait, let me guess.
The Delinquents.
I thought you were going to say something else.
Which one? Oh,
I thought you were going to talk about Dry Grasses, even though like Ceylan, they've submitted Turkey has submitted his film several times, and he just does not.
No, he doesn't.
And I mean, the guy won a Palme d'Or, and they just won't. Not that I'm not the biggest fan of About Dry Grasses, but I mean that movie has gotten so much love since its Cannes premiere.
Yeah. I mean,
you were talking about
Once Upon a Time in look at Ceylan. Once Upon a Time in Anatolia, Winter Sleep, Wild Pear Tree, About Dry Grasses. Once again, I mean, firstly, he should stop naming his films about after like flora and fauna. It seems to be not a good.
Well, About Dry Grasses is a thematically appropriate title given what the protagonist says at the end.
Yeah, but like you look at the Finnish title of Fallen Leaves, which are like dead leaves, and you look at About Dry Grasses, and I'm just like, what is with this sort of metaphorical inclination with these titles about despair?
They're all about social decline, right?
Oh, yeah, but
very deep, I know.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe it is a taste of things
but
to come.
You were talking
about Rodrigo Moreno's Delinquents.
Yes.
Now, The Delinquents is one film that really took me by surprise by the turn that it takes midway through. Once again, it's a 3-hour film, so that probably one of the reasons why.
Really?
Yeah, it's a 3-hour epic.
Thought it was like a light comedy, which I suppose it still can be, but nothing that long, can really be light.
You'll be surprised of the tonal shift, which kind of took me by surprise as well. But yeah, that was one film that actually I thought was really interesting in terms of form, in terms of the weird directions it takes, and kind of 5 different tonal shifts it has in the whole film. And I was like, okay, this is a ride. This is a proper every 20 minutes something else is going to happen kind of a thing, kind of a film. So that's something
it's on Mubi. I might have to watch it.
Really,
even though it didn't get shortlisted, but who cares?
Yeah, it really stayed with me. So that's interesting. Another, I'm a huge fan of Quentin Dupieux. So I was expecting either Dali to pop up. I'm sorry, that's not Dali. It's just how the title is. It has to be exclamation, and there are like 6 A's after Da. So I'm just trying to give it the proper Dali treatment, which is an absurd.
That's appropriate if we all spent a year saying "Da Five Bloods" just because of the way this title is stylized. You can stretch that vowel, sir.
Yeah. So we had Yannick and Dali kind of playing this here. Both Quentin Dupieux is one of the funniest, most absurdist filmmakers working today. If you haven't checked out his work, do so. There's some interesting films. One of my favorite films is Incredible But True. He's also made The Mandibles, Smoking Causes Coughing, which is really funny, the title and the film, and The Deer, and other things that he's done, which I'm forgetting right now. But he seems to be making movies at the same pace that Hong Sang-soo seems to be making movies, which is like 2 a year right now, which is incredible, but they're all quite economical, about 70 odd minutes, so not long. And yeah, you can squeeze it in a lunch break. So that's
We're
that's that.
both fans of a fire, but it's no surprise that Germany didn't submit Christian Petzold because they've done it in the past and it hasn't worked out for them. And Germany, unlike Turkey, has a pretty like I guess I'm just saying that Germany can maybe afford to be more selective
Yeah, but
because like if they submitted you and you didn't make it in, it is a much I'm guessing Germany has a bigger film industry, so they can kind of like be sort of stricter. Meaning like if they submitted your film and it didn't make it in, they have a bunch of other options. Whereas Turkey, maybe not so much. So they just keep submitting Ceylan films and it doesn't work. But then again, it's like, who's your next sort of biggest Turkish director? Whereas in Germany, you could probably have a few.
Yeah, but also I think Germany did miss a trick this time. I do think a fire is probably Petzold most accessible and light and frothy film if we are to go down that track. So uh
And we agree that it's better than the Teacher's Lounge, but I think we can also both see why Germany selected the Teacher's Lounge over Fire.
yeah, I mean
And honestly, it's a shame that Phoenix by Petzold wasn't that's a fantastic movie with Nina Hoss.
Barbara, Phoenix, and Transit. Oh my God. Oh, that's it.
I mean, like, but Transit, it makes sense why that wasn't nominated, right? I don't know if sort of Kafka-esque like political thriller is the most Academy friendly thing, but Phoenix is like right up the Academy's alley. Marital drama about like identity post World War II Germany. It's like, how did that not make it in?
So that's that. So it could be Perfect Days, Zone of Interest, Fallen Leaves, and then either Taste of Things and Totem, or Taste of Things and The Mother of All Lies. That's what I'm looking at. But it could all just be blown out of the water and could be Society of the Snow and Promised Land. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, and J.A. Bayona is of all of these filmmakers, he is probably the one who is most sort of known in America, right? He made The Impossible, he made some of the Jurassic sequels. So for several reasons. I mean, one, it seems like a very accessible survival drama. It's backed by Netflix. And yeah, its director is. I mean, even though you could say internationally, someone like Aki Kaurismäki has more repute. I mean, with our sort of mainstream audiences, like I don't know. Honest, I can easily see Society of the Snow being like a big hit on Netflix and sort of whereas Anatomy of a Fall is the international critics' darling of the year. I can see Society of the Snow being like a popular favorite just because of again the story and the very kind of visceral, direct kind of thrills it's going for. It's not a movie you need to like. I doubt it's a film that one has to, thematically ponder. It just kind of very directly hits you, right? It's a very accessible story that, by its nature, will play on the emotions.
Okay. So that was the 2024 Academy Awards Best International Feature Shortlist. And we have done it. We have gotten through it. It is 1:30 a.m. at night, and my coffee crash down is just kicking in. But we will be back because that's what we do. That's what we do for the love of cinema and love of film, and because we're still trying to be naive and hopeful about 2024. This is the kind of takeaway I've felt for our episode, that we need to hope for change, change from broken systems, hope for reform, possibility of social justice. This is the most socialistic I feel I've felt, at least in a week, which is, not too long ago. Anyway, until a week ago when I was unwell and I felt like the world is coming to an end. But now I'm renewed with bowed optimism.
Oh, I'm sorry, because you mentioned that you were feeling unwell, and I know while you were feeling unwell, you were working on your review of The Boy and the Heron. Another movie that, by the way, because we're talking about it being a banner year for international cinema, like not obviously not eligible for international feature, but may very well win animated feature. I don't believe that Spider-Verse has it in the bag. May get nominated for best score. So yeah, that's just another possible sort of spillover.
Best score definitely, because Hisashi definitely has got a shortlist for score, and maybe even
and it's been doing pretty well so
song.
far with precursors.
Yeah, so
original song. There's an original song in there.
Original, the main theme song. We'll see. Maybe not. Spinning. I'm forgetting the title. Still too late in my brain. It's freezing up. But yeah.
The Boy and the Heron original song. Spinning Globe.
Spinning Globe.
Yes,
that's right. That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll see.
So I mean, that wasn't shortlisted for original song, was it?
I don't know. No, I think Hisashi is the only one who got in for score.
Yeah. Let's see. Original song. No, I don't see it represented here.
Anyway.
But still, just speaking to the kind of the running argument of this episode, like with Parasite and Drive My Car and those and what's become a sort of annual international slot in directing. Like the international cinema has really emerged, I guess, at the Oscars over the past, 10 years or so. And this might just kind of be like the best year for that, even if all of our favorite movies aren't nominated in international feature, just spread across the categories. We may see a lot more representation than we have in the past, even if even if we don't have an international director nominated, and I'm sure we will, we're still probably overall going to see a lot more nominations for international films in categories that don't usually recognize them.
That is correct. And that is the R word again. And no, I mean representation, not the other word you're thinking of. So there we go. This is been Virat Nehru and Ron Meyer with another episode of Heron Awards podcast. We will be back with, I think it's Best Picture, right? I think we will be back.
I think that's the one we should do next. I just kind of wanted to do this episode as quickly as possible because, around the time I'm thinking, hey, you know what? There's a lot of potential for international films this year and like categories that don't normally recognize them. I'm thinking about that and sort of toying with it. And then I go online and I see like articles from Variety and The Hollywood Reporter that are like, look at all these international stars popping up. And I'm just like, oh, fuck, we need to like get on this right away before it becomes a tired subject.
Yeah. So we'll be back with Best Picture as our next episode. So that'll be one for you, the normies. This was one for us, the critics' darlings. So international feature, as we said, the critics' darling category.
And it's the only time we'll sort of talk about politics. We didn't want to, but there's just no way to really talk about the international feature category without, delving into a little bit of like
and
industry
if you
politics.
Feel that this has outed us as slightly left-leaning socialist people, then I am sorry. We're disappointing all of you. I will try to do better and reform.
The only people listening to us are left-leaning, so come on.
Before we go away, give us a shout out and tell us what your favorite international film has been. It may not be from the shortlist because, you might have seen other films based on the region that you have. So you don't have to have seen the shortlist. And I get the point that not all of these films are easily accessible or available just yet. So there could have been films from your country or your region that you like that you may want us to check out, and if they're available, we'd love to see them. And like we said in our previous discussion, we don't really believe that this category should be limited to a country picking the film. So you might have other suggestion that another film of yours, which is a favorite, should have been picked instead of the film being picked by the country that you're currently living in. And I am saying that, expecting that if people from all countries or from all parts of the globe are tuning in to this podcast, but might be someone from Nigeria, for example. I don't know. I don't know a Nigerian film. I haven't seen one this year.
More likely, if we get any responses, it'll just be like a couple people saying what a travesty it is that France failed to submit Anatomy of a Fall. It'll just be those people emailing you all over again.
Okay, if you want to tell me that Anatomy of a Fall is a bad omission, do not. I know. I'm aware of it. It's okay. And no, it doesn't make the cut of my best of 2023 list, if that means I have to turn in my
Not even close.
No, not even in the top 30.
I don't think I would include.
It's weird because I did the list. I did a top 30 list and it's not even.
Maybe we should do like a separate. Maybe we should both rewatch Anatomy of a Fall now that it's on demand and just do like a review of it together. I don't know, because I think this is, the most over. Is it fair to say that Anatomy of a Fall was the most overrated film of 2023? I'm trying to think like what I think American Fiction is overrated. I think The Holdovers is overrated. But Anatomy of a Fall, like people are just calling it a masterpiece with such vigor that
I think that's it.
I think
the kind of I guess global acclaim that film is getting across the board.
It won the fucking Palm. It took it from the zone of interest. Like that is insane.
Yeah,
to me.
I mean, if that doesn't tell you anything about the anatomy of current filmmaking, then that is a fall indeed. There we go. That is the only Anatomy of a Fall related pun I'm going to make for this episode. But I will be back with more puns and more coffee and more caustic takes. Till then, stay well, watch movies, and a very, very happy New Year, I think. Because at least it's coming close to me, for me. So
this will probably be posted after the New Year, but still close enough to the holiday.
Close enough to the holidays. I mean, you're probably basking in the New Year glow. Make resolutions that you're definitely going to break. As you're listening to this, yes. As you're listening to this, make resolutions that you're definitely going to break. Watch movies that you're definitely going to hate. Tell people about your opinions because they don't matter. And make sure that you forget whatever you've seen last year, because next year is going to be all the same all over again. So don't hold on to your movie choices, otherwise you'll. Yeah, I just can't. I can't wait. Like, because every year you have like those big contenders, and then we forget about them 24 months down the line. And I truly believe that no one will give a fucking shit about Anatomy of a Fall. Like after this season, it's just like it's a strong horse this season, and so people want to back it and put money on it. But like, who is going to actually care about this movie? Like, who at the end of this decade is going to put that on their 10 best movies of the 2020s list? I'll be amazed. Maybe we should rename this episode Why Anatomy of a Fall is a shit film, and just be very obvious about it. Or we can just do a whole podcast about that. Like, I don't even think it's a shit film. It's fine. It's fine. Totally fine. It's a 2.5. And I guess I'm just hating it a little bit. Sorry, 3.5 out of 5. No, 2.5 out of 5. Like it's a decent. Okay. It's an average. I'd give it
I'd give it a 2.5 out of 4. So I guess obviously on a 5-star scale, I'd bump it up a little bit. But
Yeah, that's fine.
yeah, I think a lot of my distaste for it is just stemming from how much praise it's got. And again, the fact that it took the palm from the zone of interest, which is just
Which, I mean,
obviously a superior project.
Yeah. And everyone thought Zone of Interest had the palm in the palm of its hand. Anyway, on that note,
Guess we weren't done with puns yet. Snuck another one in there.
On that note, good night, and we'll see you again discussing Best Picture. It's been fun, despite all the sarcasm. And Happy New Year. Remember the movies, and good night.